So welcome everybody. My name is Liz Cannon. I use AM and airs and she, her, and hers pronouns, and I direct the LGBTQ plus resource center here at UW Oshkosh. I'm going to ask folks to mute your mics and turn off your videos unless you are one of our panel members or presenters or the chancellor. And if you have questions, you can type them in the chat, and we'll open it up also for questions near the end of our program. Would like to begin with our land acknowledgement for UW Oshkosh. As we begin this event, we acknowledge the original inhabitants of this area, the Menominee and the Ho-Chunk Nations. This land encompasses the 3 campuses of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh in the Lake Winnebago region. Please take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds and celebrate the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. Thank you. So today is the 3rd annual International Pronouns Day. It's a celebration that began in October of 2018. The vision of the day, according to the International Pronouns Day website, is to seek to make respecting, sharing, and educating about personal pronouns commonplace. Referring to people by the pronouns they determine for themselves is basic to human dignity. Being referred to by the wrong pronouns particularly affects transgender and gender nonconforming people. Together, we can transform society to celebrate people's multiple intersecting identities. So the vision for this program today actually started last summer when Madison Patinod approached me to see if I could help her write a grant to pay for pronoun stickers that she could distribute to nursing students during her presentation of her senior project on LGBTQ+ health. I immediately thought we could write a grant proposal connecting her project to an International Pronouns Day program that would bring together all 3 UW Oshkosh campuses and high schools in the Fox Valley. It is my great honor to announce that our program this evening is made possible by a New Harvest Foundation grant, a grant that will also allow us to provide both the pronoun stickers for nursing students' name tags and pronoun buttons for all participating schools. I would now like to introduce Madison Patinod to thank our participating schools.
Thank you, Liz. We'd like to thank UWO Oshkosh, UWO Fond du Lac, UWO Fox Cities, and the high schools of Fond du Lac High School, Oshkosh North, Oshkosh West, Neenah High School, Menasha High School, Appleton North, Appleton West, and Appleton East. And a particular thank you goes to the advisors of GSA's diversity clubs at the 3 campuses and 8 high schools for the work you have done in connecting us with our student panel members and spreading the word about our program, as well as the work you do with the groups to educate your schools about pronouns and distribute our pronoun buttons, which we will be ordering through GLSEN. Finally, Liz and I would like to thank Morgan DePietro, who is interning at the LGBTQ+ Resource Center and working with us on this big project. So thank you.
Thank you, Madison. Your vision has really helped form this program, and I could not have done it without either you or Morgan, so thank you. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our Chancellor Andy Levitt. I think it's really important to know how supportive this particular chancellor has been of the LGBTQIA+ community on this campus. I will never forget early on in his career, we were doing a panel during Transaction Week where students were there with family members and talking about their experiences on campus. And the topic of having safe spaces to live on campus came up. And our students didn't hold back. Frankly, they didn't know Andy was in the audience. And they talked exactly about how they felt that as trans and non-binary students, there really wasn't a safe place for them to live in the res halls, and that we had been trying to get a rainbow floor for a long time. Andy took that to heart and very shortly after, we had plans in progress, and we can now say that we have a rainbow floor that we have had. I'm going to get my years wrong. I think we've had it for 4 or 5 years now, and it's going strong. So thank you, Andy, for your leadership. And I'm going to hand the metaphorical mic over to you.
Thank you, Liz. That's very kind of you. And, you know, it's always easier to just simply do the right thing. And that's what so often I try to guide myself on, is just simply do the right thing. And in that instance, that certainly is. Well, good evening. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I added that to my signature line, I don't know, about 6 months ago. And I've gotten some very interesting reactions, which I want to share some of those with you tonight as well. They're very positive, actually, reactions here. I want to welcome all of our high school students, and certainly the UWO students that are here. Thank you so much for being here. It's just, I admire you so much. Your courage and your dedication, your pride, all of those the different attributes, I think, are just really, really remarkable. I want to say it's nice that we can do this during a pandemic. And I know that we're all a little fatigued about Zoom calls, but I kind of like them in some instances. Right now, I've got 6 people staring right at me, and probably others could rotate in and out. But I want to thank Liz, Eliza. I know there's other members of the Inclusive Excellence team that are here tonight. I see Alicia's here as well. For all you do to create the kind of environment that we really must have to be the school of first choice for everyone, for everyone. That's really my goal, is that I want us to be a welcoming and supportive place, no matter who you are. So I just want to tell you my little pronoun story here. Recently on Facebook, I do a lot of Facebook. UWO shared an email that I sent to the university community, and it contained my signature my pronouns in my signature line. And there was an interesting exchange that happened as a result of this. It happened to be a particularly active message. Hello. One just a second. My computer just all of a sudden decided they want to do something else.
We can still hear and see you.
Can you see me and hear me? Okay, let me just finish. I'm sorry, I can't see you anymore, but I'll log back in when I'm done. Anyhow, it had the response to my message was somebody posted on Facebook, he, him, his. I kind of already figured out you were a male, Chancellor. And there was another student who jumped in immediately and said, it's a way for people to promote a culture of sharing pronouns. Some people's identities get mistaken all the time, and this is a way to support them. And then finally, a third person jumped in as well and said, it's a good practice to share pronouns on things regardless. So I was actually really cool to see there were allies that were online that immediately addressed this individual's question or comment about the use of my pronouns. This is actually very personal to me, and I'm sorry, I'm going to take 1 or 2 more minutes here if you don't mind, Liz. And here's the reason why. I have 3 children. They're all adult children. My middle child, his name is Scott, and he's a he, him, his. I have my oldest daughter, Genevieve, and she's a she, her, hers, but she also identifies as queer and non-binary. And Genevieve's spouse has just become a trans woman, and her name is Maple, and she goes by she, her, hers as well. They have 2 children, Stella and Dexter. Stella is a she, her, hers. Dexter, who is 5 at this point, is they, them, theirs. And then I have my youngest daughter, who is also identifies as non-binary and queer, and she's also a she, her, hers. So I got a lot to keep track of. There's no doubt about it at all, but I love them all dearly, and it's what is again the right thing to do is to show the kind of respect and dignity that they deserve and as do you, certainly if you use non-standard pronouns or non-binary. So with that, I just want to say thank you and welcome to this evening. It's going to be a very interesting discussion, and I'm particularly pleased to know that there are high school students here in the audience tonight. So Liz, I'm going to probably bow out and then I'm going to try to get back in.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Counselor.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We have two amazing speakers to begin our program this evening. Both are alumnus of UW Oshkosh. If I were to tell you everything in my heart about these two people, I would take up the whole 90 minutes, so I'm going to keep it really short. I would like to introduce Eliza Farrow. Eliza is the program assistant for both the UW Oshkosh LGBTQ+ Resource Center and the UW Oshkosh Women's Center. Neither center would be as successful as we are without them. Eliza is a psychology, women's and gender studies, and art major with an emphasis in graphic design and an LGBTQ studies certificate. Eliza is also the graphic designer for our project, and if you have seen our Pronouns 101 educational flyer, you have witnessed their talent. Next, some of you may remember Nathaniel Fors from his time as a program assistant at the LGBTQ+ Resource Center, and he continues to serve on the Harvey Milk LGBTQ+ Scholarship Dinner Committee. Yes, the center has been truly fortunate in our program assistants. At UW Oshkosh, Nathaniel majored in music with an emphasis in recording technology and music business. He is also a 2020 graduate of the Northeast Wisconsin Technical College nursing program. Join me in welcoming Eliza and Nathaniel, and I will turn the floor over to both of you.
Thanks, Liz. So I'm Eliza Farrow, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. And if you just want to give a shout out.
Yes, I'm Nathaniel Fors, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And yeah, Eliza, I'll kind of follow your lead for a little bit.
Yeah. So what's going to happen is I'm going to talk, and I'm going to talk about what non-binary means and a little bit about pronouns. And then Nathaniel will come in and talk about trans healthcare. And you might hear one of us jump in while the other is presenting. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew who we both were. All right, so I am going to start by sharing a PowerPoint. Cool, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so the definition of non-binary that we use when we do our SAFE trainings on campus, which are our students and faculty and staff education about LGBTQ+, and basically it's like an LGBTQ+ ally trainings, and we go over definitions and all other kinds of information. So the definition that we use in the SAFE training for non-binary is a person whose gender identity or expression can be described as neither man nor woman, between or beyond genders, or some combination of genders. This identity is usually related to or in reaction to the social construction of gender stereotypes, and the gender binary system. So that's pretty definition-y though. So let's break this down a little bit. So it's a person. So we have the genders of man and woman, and that's the binary that society tells us that we should be. We should be either a man or a woman, and binary means two. So society really likes to put things into two different boxes. So either you're a man or you're a woman. And folks who are non-binary are outside of that binary. So they don't identify with necessarily just like the one label of either a woman or a man. So they can identify as a variety of different other terms throughout that. And so some people view the identity as like neither being a man or a woman. Some identify it as being between genders, so being somewhere in a spectrum. So if you think of gender as a spectrum, and some folks are men and some are women, and then there's this whole spectrum of identities in between that society kind of like leaves out and ignores. And so non-binary can be anywhere in that spectrum. And then also there are some folks who don't identify within that spectrum of gender at all. So those folks often call themselves agender, and they're just not in the spectrum at all. They don't identify with a gender at all. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how non-binary works for me. So I identify as non-binary and as lesbian. I use the hashtag on this slide. This is what non-binary looks like. So if you all watched the short documentary of, what was it called?
Non-binary, a love story, I think.
I am they. I think it's called I am they. Yeah.
A non-binary love story.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the hashtag that they started, and they showed you a bunch of people using that hashtag. So I thought I would share that as well. I really like the dichotomy of these photos because non-binary to me, I've never felt like I was a man, and I've never really felt like I fit into the woman category either. So I was assigned female at birth, which means when I was born, the doctor took a look at me and said, this person is a female. So I was assigned female at birth, but I don't really feel like I fit into the category of woman. And as for me, non-binary means that I can go, I move throughout the spectrum. So sometimes I can present really femininely, like this first picture. Sometimes I can present more masculine, like the second picture. And then sometimes I also like to be androgynous. And I kind of like it when people can't figure out either what pronouns to use for me, or they use masculine coded pronouns, because I kind of like just that idea that I don't really fit into either the box of womanhood or manhood. So I think one thing that's important to note when we're talking about non-binary identities and identity in general is to make sure that we are looking at how people identify themselves, what language they're using, and how they define that language. So I told you what being non-binary means to me, but being non-binary can mean different things to different people. So if we have any non-binary folks in the audience, I encourage you in the chat, you can write up what non-binary means to you. Can be just really short or whatever. And if you're comfortable, share that in the chat so people can get an idea of what non-binary looks like in our community. If you don't want to, that's fine too. So it's really important though to make sure we understand where people are coming from and how they're defining themselves and what that means to them. Non-binary can be seen as under the trans umbrella. And sometimes folks who are non-binary will view it under the trans umbrella because transgender means to cross that gender boundary. And so because you're crossing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be crossed into another binary gender category. Like you don't have to go from man to woman or woman to man. You could go from, woman to non-binary or what have you. And so some people view non-binary under the transgender umbrella, and then some people view it as its own separate category on its own. Also, there are a lot of different other more specific terms you might hear people use that also fit under the term non-binary. Some examples of that are things like gender fluid, which is someone who kind of moves throughout the spectrum. Bigender would be somebody who moves between two different genders. Genderqueer is somebody who deviates from conventional norms of gender expression. And these are just very few. So I encourage you after this event to go find some YouTube videos or some articles by trans and non-binary folks and take a look at them and see more of the spectrum of how people identify. And I mean, for me, I use non-binary as an identity label in and of itself. And I guess I don't feel a need to be more specific than that, and I just feel like non-binary fits me, which is why I use that as an identity label. All right. So here's some photos of me growing up. So just I kind of wanted to do, since the documentary had so many more personal views. I love you all sharing these comments, and I hope people read through them on the side here. I love so okay. So the documentary really shared a lot of personal views, and so I wanted to tell a little bit more personal about my story. So I've always felt non-binary, but I've never had necessarily an identity label, like to be able to say like this is what I am. Growing up, I kind of felt more like I was a tomboy because I didn't have the terminology, even though I didn't feel like that was quite right, because I really didn't. I didn't feel like I was a girl necessarily. So this first picture here is me when I was really little at my aunt's wedding, and I was very grumpy and sassy the whole day because I was forced to wear a dress, and I did not want to wear a dress. And so like looking back, I can kind of see like, oh yeah, this has happened throughout, my entire history. The second picture, I'm the one in the yellow in the back, and as I got older, I always dressed a lot more masculinely. I got my hair cut shorter and shorter. And I'm really lucky that my mom is LGBTQ. And so she was very open to me expressing my gender however I wanted to and getting my hair cut short. So I kind of started expressing more masculinely very early. And then this last photo, I'm on the left, is with my friend Kelsey in middle school. And one thing that I kind of did also when I was younger is I wore a lot of really baggy clothes, because baggy clothes kind of hid my body more. And even though I didn't have a lot of like dysphoria necessarily around my body, I didn't feel really bad about my body. It didn't feel, I don't know, quite me. And so I did wear a lot of baggy clothes. And I remember, so you can kind of see like a bit of a bra strap here. I remember when I was in middle school, I had not, like wearing bras really hadn't crossed my mind a whole lot. Sorry. And it's not something that I was particularly interested in or wanted to do. I know a lot of girls are usually really excited when they first start wearing bras, but one of my friends' moms took it upon herself to tell my mom that she thought it was time for me to start wearing a bra. And I just think it's really interesting, as I was reflecting on my journey for this presentation, how like I felt really like this was something that I was supposed to do and that I had to do. And I didn't actually stop wearing bras again until I was well past like working in the job that I am now. It's only probably been a couple years. Sorry, my voice is being real weird. Just a second here. And so I just think it's really interesting, so I've had this identity as I grew up, and it's just kind of, that's how I came to be where I am, and that's what non-binary looks like to me, like for me. And so I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about pronouns quickly. So a lot of non-binary folks will use gender neutral pronouns. Not all of them will. Some of them still use the binary pronouns he, him, his, or she, her, hers. But a lot of folks who are non-binary might use a gender neutral pronoun. I use they, them, their pronouns. I chose my pronouns because it just was the pronoun set that felt right to me. I'll often get asked, like, how do you decide which pronouns to use? And I don't know, something about they, them, theirs just felt right. And I don't get dysphoria over people using she, her, hers for me, but I do get euphoria, or it does make me happy when people use they, them, theirs for me. And so that's kind of where I fall with that. So this table right here is some commonly used pronouns on campus. And I'm sure throughout the community. This is by no means an exhaustive list. There are lots of other pronouns other than these ones. And the best thing to do is when you introduce yourself, if you introduce yourself with your pronouns, if somebody introduces themselves with gender neutral pronouns, then just try to reflect those pronouns back to them. So when you're talking about them, use the pronouns that they gave you originally. If you're not sure about somebody's pronouns, you can ask very politely, not in front of other people, but when you're alone, you can be like, hey, what pronouns would you like me to use for you? So I'm just going to go through, I'm going to just read what they are in case you're unfamiliar with them, so you kind of know how to pronounce them. So they, them, theirs, z, zers, zers, z, here, here's. Spivak is the name of the guy who came up with these pronouns, and they are M-A heirs. Then we have V, ver, vis, fe, fair, fairs, per, pers, and z, zem, zers. So those are just some of the pronouns. When you first start learning pronouns, it can be kind of hard to figure out how to put them in sentences correctly. So there is a handy site here, and I'm going to put the link in the comments, but it's called -18. If you just look up Google pronouns and -18, it will come up, and there's a link for that in the chat. And it's a really helpful way, like you can practice putting them into different sentences. It's also really good to practice on pets because they don't particularly care what gender you assign to them or what gender pronouns you assign to them, and stuffed animals, stuff like that. It's super important to use somebody's pronouns because it can be really harmful. As Liz had mentioned earlier, when she was talking, or when A was talking about the International Pronouns Day and what it's about, it can be really harmful to use incorrect pronouns for somebody. So it's very important that you're trying your very, very best to use the pronouns that people expect you to use.
Eliza, can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
So oftentimes I like to say it's important to use gender neutral language and pronouns for people in general until you know their pronouns. But then would you agree that once you do know their pronouns, to use their pronouns? Don't continue with your gender neutral if they've told you what their pronouns are. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's you can use gender neutral pronouns, or you can just use that person's name as well. You don't necessarily have to assign a pronoun at all.
Yeah. I was just thinking the aspect that when they tell you their pronouns, you're just validating their identity and who they are by using their pronouns instead of just falling back on the simple they, them, theirs for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, you should definitely use the pronouns that people are using for themselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
If you mess up on somebody's pronouns, which very well might happen, it happens to me too. I mean, I'm not perfect. We're all socialized into the society that tells us that he, him, his, and she, her, hers are the only pronouns that exist. And so if you mess up, it's really important to not make it about you when you apologize. So you can just say sorry and correct yourself, use the correct pronoun and move on. If somebody else corrects you, you could also say, thank you for correcting me, and then use the correct pronoun and move on. I am also going to post a link here to the pronoun flyer that Liz mentioned earlier. So this gives you, it's some of the stuff I talked about, and then it gives you also some more examples, some more action steps, things like that. Otherwise, does anybody have any questions? You can use your mic quick if you have any questions, or you can put them in the chat. This is my contact information and the LGBTQ Resource Center's contact information in case you would like to send us an email. Any questions on non-binary or pronouns? All right. Well, if you do have questions, I can also answer them again at the end. Otherwise, I will hand it over to Nathaniel. And I'm also just going to put that contact information right in the chat as well, so you have that. Awesome.
All right. I think I'll try my PowerPoint for a minute.
Okay.
But then we'll see. I might rather just come back and see my face talking at myself. But let's see if I can do this. Desktop window. Okay, application. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll start with it for a little bit. So again, my name's Nathaniel. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I identify as a man of trans experience. I'll be talking, I'm going to tweak it probably a little bit, what I'll be talking about. And Eliza, if you do have anything that you want to say from your own experience, please jump in. But I'm just going to go ahead and first talk about why did I pursue nursing. Of course, I had to get, a selfie of myself at my new position. But so I went to UW Oshkosh a while. I graduated in 2012. Did a lot of different kinds of coming out. Didn't come out as as a trans person until after college. And at that time, I was going to school to become a paramedic, and just kind of a lot of things happened and fell into place. And I ended up working at an emergency department and I was out at the time identifying as a man of trans experience, and I ended up seeing lots of patients coming in that just weren't really getting the care that that I would have wanted to receive, or that I felt that they should be receiving in the LGBTQIA plus community. And this kind of had me thinking I really wanted to do more for my community. And then I ended up being blessed working at the LGBTQIA plus resource center at UW Oshkosh for about a year. And while I was there, getting to do a lot of really amazing things and meet a lot of amazing people, I decided that I needed to go back to healthcare because there was still a need. There seemed to be still a need for people that are part of the community to be caring for people in the community. So I decided, well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to learn about the things that, nurses do. And I'm going to just try to bridge a little bit of that gap. And so I really did pursue nursing, really with a passion for caring for LGBTQIA plus people. That is really, I remind myself every day, why did I become a nurse? And that's why I became a nurse, because I want to make a difference and a change for LGBTQIA plus healthcare. So some of this is kind of boring. Eliza told some really, nice personal stories. So I might jump from some of this, but I just wanted to give a few barriers to healthcare that transgender and non-binary and gender diverse people face. Oftentimes there's a high level of postponing medical care for, lots of reasons: harassment, discrimination. Sometimes it'll be just because there's limited access to care because many insurances will have transgender exclusions. So if you go to a provider and, there's you say the wrong thing, they might put a code in your chart that, makes your healthcare cost more than it should, just based on those exclusions. An interesting, it's not interesting, but a kind of sad thing is approximately 13 states, mainly the center states, don't have a specific LGBTQIA plus community health center. We do now have 2 in Wisconsin, which is very good, in Milwaukee and Madison. But some of the discrimination that transgender and non-binary people face in healthcare settings is just plain old curiosity. It could be prejudice or harassment. So I feel as a nurse and also as a human that needs healthcare, I've seen it multiple ways. And a story that happened yesterday. So I was at work and I ended up coming out to somebody, and I kind of, I actually regret it now, which makes me sad that I feel, that happens, but that's a very common thing for people in the community to come out and then not get a positive response and then wish that they could take it back immediately. But so that's kind of the curiosity thing. This person didn't have any right to ask the questions they asked, but it was very uncomfortable and it was inappropriate and it was very unexpected. Where when I'm doing a presentation and education like this, I'm ready and I'm here to talk about it. But so those curiosities and prejudice and doesn't just happen in the healthcare setting. It's daily things. It's the microaggressions of people misgendering you and using the wrong pronouns and dead naming you and things like that. So it's not just healthcare, it's everything. Another thing with discrimination is the gatekeeping, which is the requirements put into place by medical professionals to control who gets access to medical care. And this is something that there is a higher percentage, well, for non-binary people and gender diverse people, genderqueer people, it's often times harder to get the medical care than somebody who identifies as a binary trans person, because in the medical field, the binary, like Eliza was saying earlier, the two boxes, the man, woman, they seem to really, people like to just, you have to be one or the other. You can't be anything else. So it's in the medical field, it's harder as a non-binary or genderqueer person to get the access to the medical care that they need to help them, outwardly express their gender with medical interventions. So oftentimes people will adopt a binary transgender identity for healthcare settings just for the safety of it and for the ability to get the care that they need. Because if people still are so unsure, they're just so uneducated still on non-binary people healthcare, and they want you to be in a specific box. So it's very important that we talk about non-binary people in healthcare, not just binary trans people. So something I wanted to talk about too was advocacy, which is can be very difficult, especially when you're not used to it. For me, I've advocated a few times, but I never really do it completely alone because it's very scary to do by yourself. And I should also make sure I'm not saying everyone can just go advocate for themselves. It's the easiest thing and, you'll be fine. There are so many barriers to it: fear of judgment, fear of retaliation, inexperience of, asserting your needs. These are all things that I still deal with. And, working in healthcare, I still have all of these same barriers to advocating for myself, which maybe be partially why I went into healthcare, because sometimes it feels easier to advocate for others. So an alternative, if self-advocacy is not possible because of safety is always the number one priority. And it's also so important. I want to remind everybody in the LGBTQIA community that we are all worthy of dignity and respect. And it is absolutely, it's in our right to have those things. And then alternatives to self-advocacy are, you could ask a trusted friend or family member to help advocate for you or with you, a therapist, a teacher, anybody that is a trusted ally. And then there's also organizations with professional advocates. I know there's Diverse and Resilient out of Appleton. You could contact the LGBTQIA Resource Center for more resources, but there are some of those available as well. And then I have some strategies for self-advocacy, if that's something that, not just self-advocacy, but advocacy. It's really important. I'll give a personal story here because personal stories, I think, are some of the, most important. I did try to advocate for myself with a provider who was, I also brought up in the beginning, transgender exclusions in insurance. And so I had a physical, and it was basically like a yearly annual primary care visit, and it was basically identical to the visit that my partner had, labs and everything, and my bill was $2,000 where her bill was $180 or something like that. So that was because we had the trans exclusions in our insurance, and this was a doctor that was highly recommended for the transgender and non-binary community. And that was the first time I really felt like I had to self-advocate. And some things that I did was I kept all of the information, all of the communication between anybody at the office and insurance, whoever I talked to, I kept it all, kept the log of the dates, the responses I got. For this, I did make some phone calls. I found advocates to talk to and to try to get more information and to get that support. And sometimes the support you need is just, you need the support of people around you. Hashtag queer family, to be there for you and lift you up and support you and just remind you that you are worthy of the respect and the dignity that you're seeking, which usually is just a very basic thing like that you're seeking. So then, like I said, identifying the people that can support you. And if the first way didn't work, maybe there's another way to try. But just kind of that lean on your support system. That's a really big thing. Then I want to talk about some of the best practices in LGBTQIA+ healthcare. Communication is so huge, and 55% of it is nonverbal. So I know, I'm sure so many people in this presentation have had nonverbal communication where, you say your pronouns to someone and you can just see their body tense up or just the silence. So the nonverbal communication is really big. So it's important for anybody that might be looking for best practices in healthcare to be humble and to show humility, approach everybody, and not just patients, people, with empathy and convey that respect. And like when I asked Eliza before about pronouns, validate patients' identities, viewpoints, and concerns, and use inclusive and gender neutral language. But if you know someone's pronouns, it's so important to use the pronouns, because whenever I tell people to use gender neutral pronouns, I think sometimes they think, oh, well, then I'll just use that for everybody. But then that's not validating to someone when you told them their pronouns. So if someone just wanted to use they, them, theirs for me after I told them my pronouns were he, him, his, I would feel very invalidated, because they're like, oh, I told you my pronouns and you're not using them. So do you see me do you see my identity or not? So I just thought that was really important. And I wanted to make sure I asked Eliza if they agreed. But then also, of course, listen without jumping to conclusions. And then creating positive spaces, this in a welcoming environment. This is not just for healthcare facilities. This could be your own home or your cubicle or your dorm room or whatever it is. But just, if you're in a dorm room, you probably don't have non-discrimination policies posted. But if you do, make sure they have gender identity and expression and sexual orientation in there. But have all gender restrooms whenever possible, just having symbols like the safe triangle, pride flags, and then more on the healthcare aspect is that the facility has inclusive health history forms that ask more than just the boxes of men and women or male and female. And the other thing I always notice is that they have gender identity and sex assigned at birth always mixed up. They're like, what's your sex? And they say man or woman, but that's not that, your sex would be female, male, intersex. It's not, so that's just the thing I always pick on places for. But this is another personal story. I went to go to a new mental health provider, and I'm filling out the paperwork, and there's just the two boxes. It says gender, man, woman, and I just put a box and I wrote my own thing. And then I did end up telling my therapist, because my therapist was very queer friendly and inclusive. So I told her I really was off-putting when I came in here. So then I ended up having a phone call with the public relations people, because they wanted to try to fix it. So just talking to my therapist, and then she went, to the people and so things kind of went from there. So I also want to say, like, I can't self-advocate every time. I mean, there's times where I just can't say anything and I just want to turn around and leave and never go back. And that's, you know, that's okay. It's not an expectation that you're able to do this every time, because with the microaggressions every day, the minority stress of that gets piled on, you know, the stress that people in the LGBTQIA community face, aside from the everyday stress of anybody, just really adds up. And sometimes you just are unable to, and that's completely, it's really trying to build up a support network around you is very helpful, but sometimes that's really hard too. And then I wanted to talk about.
Can I jump in quick, Nathaniel?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a shout out to our health center, student health center on campus. They have an inventory. It's like an organ inventory. So you basically like what parts you have instead of like what your gender is, so that they can give you the best healthcare based on what your body looks like. And also they do hormone replacement therapy and stuff like that through the students health center as well. So.
Yes, that's fantastic. That's something I usually talk about, but I was trying to keep this a little bit down, not specifically there, but the organ inventory in place of kind of like those forms. Oftentimes you see too, you know, you get to one spot and it says women only, and it's like, okay, that's really off-putting. And then it asks you questions. Are you pregnant? Might you be pregnant? And so, you know, to get away from those things. And when you find places, if I find some place that has really positive, inclusive forms, I try to say something to make, you know, give them that little like positive affirmation that this is, you know, thank you for doing this. But so some special considerations for youth. Many LGBTQIA plus youth are subject to bullying. And that's just important because, especially, I mean, if I'm talking healthcare, but just in general, an adult or somebody that, you know, looked up to a role model, you may be the only or first adult confidant for an LGBTQIA plus youth. And this also goes for anything, not just healthcare, but the degree of safety, comfort, and respect that transgender and non-binary youth feel often has a great impact on, I'm just going to say, their future. It's not just access to healthcare, but their future in general. And you do have the power to help create a safe space. And it's also, I think, really important to acknowledge the trust that they put in you when they choose to come out to you. It's a really big deal when someone trusts you. And I mean, it's really time to, you know, to kind of step up and really, if they trust you to that, I think it's very important that you do your homework and you learn as much as you can so you can support that person, because they really look up to you and they trust you enough to share that with you. So that's some information that I think is really important, that you learn as much as you can so you can support that youth. And then I think this is just a really cool quote, because a lot of people, like the person the other day said to me when I came out to her, she said, she came back later. I thought the conversation was over, and she came back later and she said, you know, just so you know, if you want people to understand, you have to answer their questions. And it was that's literally what she said to me. And I was like, wow, in my head, I couldn't believe she said that, especially as someone who wants to educate and does educate. But when you're caught off guard, you know, a lot of the stuff goes out the window, like advocating for yourself. A lot of it you just go into kind of fight or flight. But so she said, if you want people to understand, and I think this is interesting. So if you yourself are not of trans experience, understanding isn't necessarily a possibility. That's not the end goal. The end goal is more of how do you make space for that which you can never understand. So I just thought that was a pretty good quote that kind of sums up the importance of, it's not just about understanding, it's about the respect space. It's about validating people for who they are, for who they know themselves to be, validating their identities that they share with you. So that's what I had. Does anybody have any questions?
We're going to wait and hold questions toward the end.
Perfect.
And I can't thank you both enough for setting the stage for us. We would now like to move to our student panel, and I hope all of you in the audience had a chance to watch the documentary, I Am They, a Non-Binary Love Story. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. but a documentary cannot take the place of the stories of those of us living in the Fox Valley. So I would like to begin by asking our panel members to introduce themselves, your name, pronouns, your school or campus, how you identify within the LGBTQIA+ community. And I will call on people quickly so we'll eliminate any confusion of who goes when. So let's start with Morgan.
Hi, my name is Morgan. I go to UW Oshkosh, the Oshkosh campus. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am a non-binary queer human. And that was all the questions, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Pantheon.
Okay, my name's Pantheon. I go to Oshkosh West. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm gender fluid and also transgender at the same time, like that falls under that. A lot of people get confused whenever I just say gender fluid. Did I miss anything?
Nope, perfect. Lux.
I suppose it would help if I unmute myself. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I currently am at Oshkosh, but I just graduated from UW Fond du Lac that I spent almost 3 years at. I identify as gender queer. Queer is just really encompassing of my identity.
Thank you. Ari. Is Ari with us? All right, let's move on to Bella.
Hello, my name is Bella. My pronouns are they, them, their, or ze, them, zer. I go to the University of Oshkosh Fox Cities campus, and I am an agender individual.
Thank you. Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm a trans man. I go by he, him, his, and I go to Oshkosh North High School.
Wonderful. And Dre? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is Dre here? All right. Well, if either Ari or Dre come back in, just let us know and we'll get you into the conversation. So our first question for the panel. Did you feel that the film did a good job representing non-binary trans individuals, and why or why not? Let's start with Bella.
I feel like the film did a very wonderful job of representing like non-binary and trans individuals, because it brought up like many things that I feel like if we think about, all of us can really relate to. Of course, every experience is unique in itself because everyone feels a little differently. But especially with issues that like occur within our society because of those of who maybe do not understand or do not wish to understand. And this causes many similar experiences to pop up within each non-binary trans individual. And the film brought up a lot of things that I feel like we could, how do I say this? Oh, I can't speak English. That we can really have to think about even like before adulthood or like after adulthood, or even when we're like older, we might still have to think about. And so, yeah, I thought that the film did a very wonderful job.
Wonderful. Matthew.
I did not get to watch the whole thing, but from what I saw of it, I feel like it made sense to me. Like I forgot their name, but the main person in that documentary, I related to their experiences and all the struggles that they had. I feel like it was very informational.
It was fox and owl.
Okay.
Oh, and what specifically did jumped out at you? Why did you identify with them?
Just because I've also had struggles like legally with trying to get like my name changed and stuff.
Thank you. Morgan.
So I thought that it accurately represented the individuals in the film. It's hard to say if it accurately represents everybody because it's only two people, but I think that because the film was created by them for the most part, I think that it really did a good job of representing, what they wanted to portray and show about themselves. But yeah, there were a lot of things in there that I found myself relating with and some things that I didn't because I haven't really had any problems with like legal name changes or anything. I just have my name that I was born with and I haven't had any problems with any sort of hormone therapy. I haven't really run into that because I haven't done any of that. So there was some things that I felt weren't really related to my experiences, but I could definitely see how they would relate to other people in the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you. Pantheon.
I feel it did cover like a lot of areas that I haven't actually been able to talk to anyone else with about, like on the Good Morning Britain show, I believe it was called, the argument about trans race, I guess you would call. That's something I've had to like argue with people about a lot, and I've never heard anyone else bring it up, and it just brought up small aspects I'd never even thought about, and I felt it did do a good job representing a lot of people. Obviously not everyone, because there's so many people, but it did a good job overall.
For those who hadn't watched the film, can you explain what the person who was running the show, what he said and why it was problematic?
All right, so he basically tried to pose this question. I'm sorry, there's an alarm. He tried to pose the question, okay, but what keeps me from like changing my race? What keeps me from saying I'm a black woman? He was a white man. And they didn't want to argue about that because they were on that show about non-binary and transgender issues, and he was obviously trying to steer them away from that into absurdity.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Lux?
I think it did a really good job of challenging what our culture defines as normal. How everyone wants to kind of still follow the binary, and you find little excuses everywhere. I did that conversation from Good Morning Britain is just kind of how ridiculous conversations can get just by, it usually starts out by saying my pronouns. So it's the first interaction with someone. And they touch base even on how exclusionary it is, even within the LGBTQ plus community. I, for example, have had a bisexual male tell me that my identity is invalid. And it's like, this isn't the conversation I wanted to have the moment I met you, but okay, here we go. And so some of them can be extreme, but it is extreme if you, just the idea to say that I don't follow the rules set that everyone else seems to, follow. It just, for some people, it's hard to grasp, so just the arguments that arise from that. I didn't have issues changing my name. I changed it. But I also, I haven't tried changing it to Lux now, actually, because now I don't go by the other name that I changed it to. So it'll be interesting to see how that experience might change in the future. But I
Thank you. What would you like everyone to know about pronouns? And if you would like, how did you choose your pronouns? Let's start with Lux this time.
I'm really glad I took a drink quick then. What I experience a lot with my pronouns, the they, them, is everyone uses the excuse that they were taught it's a multiple, that you can't use they as a singular person. And that's just kind of not true, because I use the unknown friend example. If you have a friend coming over who wants to bring another person and that's all okay, sure, what kind of drinks do they like? So, the first thing I go to is looking into the dictionary, which actually, even in 1973, my huge copy that I have, the third definition of they is actually anyone that people or persons who represent an unspecified in general, so I choose mine because I was born female, but was never really liked being called she. But then I don't mind going by the he, but then I also feel like that's kind of, I only like it because it's not she. So they has always just been more encompassing. Even if you want to go with the multiple meaning, you can look at it as, multiple genders that, for the more fluid, or just because it's just a whole separate category then. So I think they is just kind of settled with that, and it's really suiting and encompassing for me.
Thank you. Bella.
I think that calling someone by the right pronouns helps more than people would think. When growing up, I grew up with a deaf mother, and so she can't really hear herself speak sometimes. So she would call me by every pronoun that is under the sun, and I always thought that was a normal thing, that I was completely comfortable with that. And when people would try to assign me to just one certain pronoun, I would be like, that doesn't feel quite right, because I don't feel really attached to she, her, or he, him. I'm okay with people calling me that, but it's not something that really sits right. And when they, them appeared in my life, because I did not know about any of this until about probably 5 to 10 years earlier, it really sat with me, and I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I don't feel as if I'm any specific gender, but they, them really felt very comfortable. And I'm personally trying out sie, them, zer lately, and I'm finding that that's very comfortable as well. And yeah, it just, figuring out what my pronouns were really helped a lot, because it confused me for the longest time. And I honestly felt really depressed, because I was like, is this a normal feeling? Not feeling like any specific gender. And then I became more involved in the LGBT community, and I realized that it was a much greater spectrum than I thought it was. And I felt that, yes, I am this, a gender, and that's exactly who I am. They, them suits me, and sie, them, zer suits me, and anything really suits me at this point.
Matthew.
So my experience as a transgender man is I feel like very different from a lot of the experiences that other people go through, because the reason why I transitioned was because of things that have happened to me in the past, and I just sorry, I just dropped something. I feel like those reasons are typically not why people choose to transition. So I had a hard time like finding out who I was, and it caused a lot of mental health problems for me. But once I found out, like, and got a hold of my identity, it made things a lot easier. And I was lucky to have a supportive family and friends who were mostly supportive, and a lot of supportive teachers. I know that a lot of people don't have that experience, but I'm grateful for that. And I feel like it's very important, or it was very important for me to find my pronouns, and I feel like it's important for other people to find the pronouns that they identify with too, because for me, it caused a lot of problems in the end because I didn't know who I was or who I felt like. But when I found out, it made things so much easier. So at my school, Oshkosh North, we did some panels last year because, coronavirus. And basically it was about diversity, and I talked to people about my experiences and how important it is to be inclusive, and how important pronouns are.
Thank you. Thank you. Pantheon.
One thing that I've had issues with multiple times throughout my life is people won't like me, or they won't like someone else I know who is also transgender, and they feel like they have the right to not use their pronouns just because they don't like that person. And I feel like it should be said pronouns aren't a right. They're literally aren't a privilege, I'm sorry. They're not like something that can be taken away as easy as people like to make it seem. And finding my pronouns, I grew up in a very open home about that. So it wasn't too hard for me. I knew I was a different gender around the age of 11, but I never figured that out what it truly was for me until I think freshman year, so 3 years ago. And I figured that out when I was talking with my brother, and I don't know, something just clicked. We hadn't been talking in a while and I don't know, just talking with him, I figured it out, even though we weren't talking about anything like that.
Cool. Thank you. Morgan.
So, I'll answer the first part of the question. What do you want people to know about pronouns? I want people to know something that I think is really important is knowing that pronouns aren't binary, like people, and they're really important to a lot of people too. Yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. And then how did I choose mine? Which mine really were like a choice for me because I'm okay with she. It's okay. And like my family calls me she because I'm a closeted non-binary person. None of my family has any idea what non-binary is. And there are quite a few people in my life that don't know, and I'm okay with that. I choose my safety. We like safety. But so I ended up choosing mine because I don't care for the social constructs that like go with being either a man or a woman. I'm not really about that, and I really like to challenge the social norm. So they, them just makes me really happy, and I really enjoy it. And yeah, I find it very freeing and empowering.
So what are your experiences as a trans and or non-binary student at your school or your campus? In what ways is it accepting? In what ways is it challenging? And why don't we start with Matthew?
My flag just fell off my back. Oh. I'm sorry, what was the question?
It's all right. What is your experience as a trans and or non-binary student at your school? What ways is it accepting or challenging?
Well, when I first came out, I was in middle school in 6th grade, and that was not a very good experience because people were not accepting of me. I got like threats, I got bullied physically and otherwise, and I just had to move to a different school. And from there on, things got better because I was in a different environment with people who didn't know me, and so I could like introduce myself in a different way than I could with the people that I had gone to school with before. And people were accepting of me, and that felt good. Like the teachers and the students. And when I went to high school, things got much easier because of my guidance counselor and my supportive teachers and the GSA club. So I felt way more included and not like an outcast.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Pantheon?
I've had countless experiences with transgender issues in my school. Actually, 8th grade was my first year going to public school before I was homeschooled, and I was still figuring out my gender in that time. I used they, them pronouns at the time, and there was a teacher I really liked, and I went to him first. I hadn't told anyone I was using they, them pronouns at the school, and I told him, and he basically just dismissed it, and he never used them. He never talked about them with me, and that really hurt me. I didn't tell anyone about anything like that for the rest of the year. And then I got to high school, and there was this guidance counselor. Her name's Miss Wagner, and I don't know, she like noticed I was trans almost right away, and I was a lot more open with her, and basically she's helped me with all those issues. She even guided me here. She pointed this out to me. Most of my issues in high school has now been with kids because the teachers are very much accepting. Getting into group projects a lot is my main issue. People will, instead of doing their work, they'll continuously ask me about what I have down there or where I go to the bathroom, and it's like, I just want to do the work. So that has been an issue. I've even had someone shove a hockey stick into my stomach. That was fun. And yeah, those are all the immediate ones I can remember. Like, obviously there's others, but those are on the top of my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. Morgan.
So my experiences, I have only come out as queer and non-binary in college. I have not had the middle school, high school horror scene, which I'm sure if I did, it would have been a disaster. I went to Hortonville. It's a rural town. Yeah, but it's, I have a lot of sympathy and, admiration for people who are in high school and middle school who are willing to embrace their non-binary and trans identities because it's really hard and kids are really mean. So yeah. The experiences at college for me have actually been generally really good. My professors are really nice, really accepting. I'm in the music department. And yeah, I've seen a lot of things move in the right direction through college because music is really gendered. But I've seen a lot of things change, like in the wind ensemble. I know the dress code got readjusted a little bit where it used to be tuxes for men, black clothing for women, but now it's a little more general. It's like tuxes for, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's like tuxes or black clothes depending on what you prefer. So I think that's really cool. And I have a lot of professors who see that my pronouns on Canvas are they, and they'll acknowledge that and say like, I have never really used those pronouns, but I'm working really hard on it. So yeah, it's been a very supportive experience. It's more outside of school, but I'd say in school it's been really, really good.
Thank you. Bella.
I didn't come out as agender until also college. So I don't have any high school experiences. I had enough to think about with my sexuality. But college has actually been pretty accepting, at least the people have been. The teachers, they use the correct pronouns, and they actually ask about pronouns, which I love that. Something difficult is the fact that on my campus, there is only one technically gender neutral bathroom. So that's a very common problem, I'm pretty sure. So and that's on the other side of the campus, so it's not exactly something people can use every day. So whatever I am, I guess, appearing as that day or feeling more likely, I have to use the bathroom that I feel the safest in, which is more than often the female one. But it is still pretty disappointing that there isn't more gender neutral bathrooms.
Thank you. Lux.
Yeah, I came out in college with my gender. Bella, I feel you. The sexuality was hard enough to get through. And so for Fond du Lac, it was mostly positive experiences. The professors were all extremely welcoming. I really loved seeing when you could find them like right first day introductions. They present, even I don't know if I've ever actually really had a non-binary professor yet, but not there at least. But they the cisgendered would even do it, and that was like super amazing. I think the challenge again is the bathroom. There was apparently 2 on the Fond du Lac campus. I had never found them. I looked, but I know there was on 2 separate sides. And so it was like kind of a game. If I had nothing to do in between classes, I'm like, oh, let's find that mythical neutral bathroom to go. And then eventually you're like, okay, but I need to go. So I guess the ladies' room it is. But I mean, it's the same kind of difficulties you kind of see in the daily life anyway. But I never felt uncomfortable, talking about my gender there. And so even with the students, if they didn't understand, they were more than willing to learn. And or they just probably stayed away from me because I was the president of the Pride Alliance. So I would assume they would just know better not to come, with any kind of negativity my way. So I had a good experience there.
Thank you. I see that we have a question in our chat. So this says, we have some people who will become K through 12 teachers soon. Do you have thoughts to share with future teachers? And let's start with Pantheon for this one.
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Yep. With college students who are majoring in education and are going to be K through 12 teachers, and wondering what suggestions you have for them as future teachers.
When a kid opens up to you about something like that, don't dismiss it. They trusted you enough to take in that information or maybe even use that information, even if they're completely open about it, like they don't care about you specifically. Still don't dismiss that. Use their pronouns. Make sure they understand you care.
Thank you. Bella?
I'm probably just going to ride off of that one, being as accepting as possible, because just the usage of pronouns could change a lot in someone's daily life.
Matthew?
This one is easy for me because I literally did like 2 whole panels on this question in my my freshman year. So some of the ways that you can be accepting of your transgender students is like saying your pronouns when you first meet your class, asking what pronouns they go by, like your students go by. And you know, some people have like bathroom tags like you use when you go to the bathroom. And instead of, this was something that I didn't think of, but instead of putting like men's restroom or women's restroom on it, you could just put bathroom on it. And sometimes it makes trans kids feel a little more included.
Nice. Fox?
I think creating, not only creating the space to be welcoming and safe for all individuals, and but also not becoming the silent teacher that doesn't do anything. You know, if you see things happening, or you know, the first step is to use people's pronouns, and you know, if you present yours right away, and then if you hear people misgendering, and you know, standing up and saying something, and like using it as a moment to teach, but also making sure that sometimes I've seen like a silent questionnaire you can do before even doing introductions of, you know, what do you identify as? Are you safe to identify this way in front of people? Do others know? Have you come out yet? Things like that, just so that it doesn't put people on the spot as well, you know, because then that gives them the ability to tell you, and then they can let you know that they want you to know, but they don't want others to know. So then that can kind of also influence how you do introductions.
Right. I'm happy to say that Ari is with us again. So Ari, could you introduce yourself and talk about your identity, your pronouns, the school you go to, and maybe talk about what you would suggest that future teachers should know?
Yeah, hello. My name's Ari. I use he, him, his pronouns. And sorry, what was your other question?
What would you suggest that future teachers of K through 12 should know to make sure that they are teaching trans and non-binary students successfully?
I know in the beginning of the year, a couple of my teachers put out like Google Forms with pronouns options. So I think you first want to establish, even before the students come to school, like a really nice, comfortable, safe environment where you don't have to assume anything.
Wonderful, thank you. And I just did want to double check, did Dre ever join?
I don't think so.
Okay, really don't want to leave people out. Morgan.
Okay, so this idea was actually of my girlfriend sitting next to me. This was of her creation that I thought was like such a good idea. Something that I completely forgot about, and I think I forget about a lot, but it's really important also for college teachers, like for all teachers, but is remembering to do attendance accurately. So whether that be not even naming off the roster sheet and just letting students name themselves, or it going off the roster sheet and allowing for alternative names and then accurately marking the roster. I'm not really sure how that works for different schools, but just kind of doing what you think is best to allow for people who have other names so you're not outing them in front of a whole class. Yeah.
Wonderful. Our final question is, what do you think is the best thing about being trans or non-binary? Let's start with Pantheon.
I think the best thing about it was, for me, was when I learned about it, I suddenly gained more control over my mind and body. I realized this wasn't it. This wasn't what I had to go with just because it's what I was born with. and I don't know, I've just evolved, I guess, a lot from then. And also the community, like, I see two people on the street. One of them is obviously trans. I don't know how else to say that. The other isn't. I immediately trust them more for some reason. It's just my initial reaction.
Nice. Ari.
So since I came out, I guess I've just been a lot more compassionate and understanding, and I have a natural like desire to learn more, I guess.
Wonderful. Matthew.
So I spent way too many years hating myself because I was transgender, but the best thing about being transgender is when you just learn how to accept yourself. And when you do that, you can find things that you're happy about with yourself that maybe you didn't used to be happy with before. Like, ever since I, really started accepting myself, sometimes I felt like I didn't need to wear a binder because I came off as very, masculine or male presenting, and I felt really good about that. And I'm very passionate about my community and speaking up. And I kind of let everybody know that who is in the community at like my school and stuff that I'm there. And some people think I'm like annoyingly passionate about it, but I don't really mind.
Keep being passionate. Thank you. Lux.
After coming out, it's just it's you find acceptance of yourself, and you no longer have to explain to yourself why you're or talk yourself into doing things, wearing such and such because you're supposed to. But also seeing how culture has limited me allows me to be more aware how culture is limiting to others. And, when I meet new people or just looking at people or hearing their stories, I start thinking about ways in which just their daily lives could be challenged and how I can make that better for them, or how I can be a better advocate for people who, as Nathaniel had said earlier, even if you can't advocate for yourself, I find it really easy to advocate for others because I know how hard the struggle is.
Thank you. Bella.
I think the best thing is when you're suddenly learning about this identity, say that right, yeah, identity that you kind of align yourself with, and it's the sudden being comfortable with yourself, feeling okay with that identity, and no longer feeling like you have to be contained within a certain box that society kind of presents us with, and just starting to be happy with yourself and who you want to become. I think that's what the best part is.
Thank you. Morgan.
So mine is the best thing about being non-binary is not feeling guilty about my very hairy girl legs. And that's like the funny answer, but I'm like really serious when I say that because it's kind of like it allows for freedom of expression, and I don't feel like the guilt of looking in the mirror and looking at like myself and thinking that I have to construct to these norms, which nobody does. Even if you're a man or woman, you don't have to, but I just kind of felt relieved of that. And like me and my leg hair, we're taking the world by storm. That's it.
Wonderful. I know I speak for everybody in the audience when I say I can't thank you all enough for being here tonight, for sharing yourselves with us. And I know that all of us are going to take this evening into the future and change even just a little bit about the way we interact with people in this world. So thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who was here this evening. And I know we will continue these conversations as we move into the world.